Canada looks fine from the outside. Everything seems like it's working. Polite, safe, stable. A country that dodged the 2008 financial crisis. A country with universal health care. A country that welcomes immigrants. A country Americans sometimes point to and say, why can't we be more like Canada? But beneath the surface, something is breaking quietly. Without the dramatic currency collapses of Turkey or Argentina, without the hyperinflation of Venezuela, without the visible riots and defaults that signal economic disaster, Canada's collapse is different, it's slow, it's hidden, and most Canadians don't realize it's happening until it's too late. Because the problems are buried beneath statistics that look good on paper but mask a darker reality. GDP is growing, but only because of population growth and debt. Employment numbers look decent, but wages can't keep up with housing costs. The government says the economy is strong, but half the population is living. Paycheck to paycheck, Canada isn't collapsing like a building that catches fire. It's collapsing like a foundation that erodes slowly, silently, until one day the weight becomes too much and everything comes down at once. This is Fiscoria, where every video will change how you see money history and the systems controlling your life. If you're new here, hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because what you're about to learn is something most Canadians refuse to admit. Their economy isn't fine. It's quietly falling apart. To understand why Canada is quietly collapsing, you need to understand what makes the collapse quiet. Because Canada isn't experiencing the dramatic crises that grab headlines. There's no currency in free fall, no government default, no hyperinflation, no mass unemployment. On paper, Canada looks stable. GDP growth is positive, unemployment is relatively low, the government still functions, but those numbers hide what's actually happening, because Canada's GDP growth isn't coming from productivity, it's coming from population growth and debt. Canada's adding 500,000 immigrants per year. That increases GDP automatically. More people means more consumption, more housing transactions, more economic activity. But GDP per capita, the measure of how much wealth each individual produces, is stagnating. Canadians aren't getting richer, there are just more of them. And the growth that does exist is financed by debt. Canadian households are the most indebted in the G7. They owe $180 for every $100 they earn. That debt fuels consumption, which shows up as GDP growth, but it's not real growth. It's borrowing from the future. And the future's running out. This is why Canada's collapse is quiet. The statistics look fine, the surface appears calm, but underneath the foundation is crumbling. The first silent crisis is the housing bubble, and it's the worst housing bubble in the developed world. In Vancouver, the average home price exceeds $1.2 million. The median household income is $72,000. That's a price-to-income ratio of over 16 to 1. Economists consider 3 to 4 times income affordable. Anything above 5 is a bubble. Vancouver is at 16. Toronto is nearly as bad. The average home is over $1.1 million. Even smaller cities like Victoria, Hamilton, and Kelowna have seen prices double in the last decade. Young Canadians, even those with good jobs, can't afford to buy homes. A couple earning a combined $120,000 per year, which is well above median, can't qualify for a mortgage on an average home in Toronto or Vancouver. They're priced out permanently unless the bubble bursts. And if the bubble bursts, it will take the entire economy with it, because 30% of Canada's GDP is tied to real estate, construction renovations, mortgages, real estate transactions, home, equity lines of credit. The entire economy is built on the assumption that housing prices will never fall, but bubbles always burst, and Canada's bubble is worse than the United States in 2008. Canadian household debt is higher, home prices relative to income are higher, and the percentage of the economy dependent on real estate is higher. When this bubble pops, and the damage will be catastrophic, banks will be exposed, mortgages will default, construction will collapse, and millions of Canadians who believe their home was their retirement plan will discover they're underwater, owing more than their house is worth. But the collapse is quiet because everyone pretends it won't happen. The government doesn't want to address it because fixing the housing crisis means allowing prices to fall, which means angry homeowners who vote. The Bank of Canada is trapped. If it raises interest rates to fight inflation, it crashes the housing market. If it keeps rates low, the bubble grows and inflation stays high. There's no good option, only bad and worse. And so the bubble continues, growing quietly until it can't anymore. The second silent crisis is immigration, and this is the crisis no one is allowed to talk about, because even raising the issue is labeled politically incorrect, racist, xenophobic. So it's discussed in whispers on social media, in private conversations, but not in mainstream media, not by politicians, not openly. But the numbers are undeniable. Canada is accepting over 500,000 immigrants per year for a country of 40 million people. That's a population growth rate of 1.3% per year, the fastest in the developed world, higher than the United States, higher than Australia, higher than any European country, and the infrastructure can't keep up. Canada is building roughly 200,000 housing units per year, but it needs over 500,000 just to keep up with population growth. The gap grows every year, which is why housing prices keep rising. It's not greedy developers, it's not speculation, it's math. More people, not enough houses, prices go up. And it's not just housing. Healthcare is overwhelmed. Canadian hospitals and clinics were already understaffed before the immigration surge. Now emergency room wait times average 8 to 12 hours. In some cities longer, surgeries are delayed months or years. 6.5 million Canadians don't have a family doctor. They rely on walk-in clinics or emergency rooms, and every year hundreds of thousands more people are added to the system without adding doctors, without adding hospitals, without expanding capacity. Schools are overcrowded. Classrooms that were built for 25 students now have 35. Teachers are overwhelmed, parents are complaining, but nothing changes because the immigration targets keep rising. Why? Because immigration inflates GDP. More people means more economic activity, which makes the government's economic statistics look good. It allows politicians to claim the economy is growing even though GDP per capita, the measure that actually matters, is flat or falling. Immigration also suppresses wages. When you flood the labor market with workers, wages don't rise. Employers have no incentive to pay more. There's always someone willing to work for less. Young Canadians who can't afford housing also can't demand higher wages because they're competing with new arrivals who will accept lower pay. This benefits corporations, it benefits wealthy Canadians who own property and businesses, but it devastates the middle class and the young, and the costs of immigration, the healthcare, the schools, the infrastructure are borne by taxpayers, many of whom are themselves struggling. But raising these concerns publicly is career suicide. Politicians who suggest reducing immigration are attacked. Media outlets that report on the strain are accused of bigotry, and so the issue remains quiet even as it grows more severe every year. The third silent crisis is healthcare. Canada's healthcare system is collapsing, not in a dramatic, sudden way, but slowly, quietly, in ways that Canadians accept as normal. Because the decline has been so gradual, they don't remember what it used to be like. Canada has universal healthcare on paper. In practice, it's rationed by wait times. If you need elective surgery, you wait months, sometimes over a year. If you need to see a specialist, you wait months just to get an appointment. Emergency rooms are overwhelmed. People wait 8, 10, 12 hours to be seen. In some cases, people die waiting, and this is in peacetime in a wealthy country with no war, no famine, no external crisis, just a system that's quietly failing. The problem is that Canada's healthcare system is funded by taxes, but has no mechanism to control demand. Healthcare is free, which means people use it even for minor issues, because there's no cost to the patient. But there is a cost That cost is borne by everyone else in the form of longer wait times, and the system can't expand fast enough to meet demand, especially as the population grows by 500,000 people per year. And as the population ages, Canada's baby boomers are retiring. They're entering the phase of life where they need more healthcare, chronic conditions, surgeries, long-term care, and there aren't enough doctors, nurses, or facilities to handle it. And the people who could fix it, the doctors and nurses, are leaving. Over 300 doctors leave Canada for the United States every year. Why? Because they can earn 2 to 3 times more in the US. A family doctor in Canada earns $250,000 to $300,000 per year. In the United States, that same doctor earns $400,000 to $500,000 and pays lower taxes. The math is simple. Nurses face the same calculation. They're overworked, underpaid, burnt out, and many are quitting. Some leave for the US. Others leave healthcare entirely, and the system can't replace them because training a doctor takes a decade. Training a nurse takes years, and Canada isn't training enough to replace those who leave, let alone enough to handle the growing population. The result is a system in quiet collapse. It still functions barely, but every year it gets worse. Wait times grow, quality declines, and Canadians who are told they have the best healthcare system in the world quietly suffer. Some wealthy Canadians, those who can afford it, are opting out. Private clinics are opening, offering faster service for cash. This is technically illegal under Canada's healthcare laws, but the laws aren't enforced because the government knows the public system is failing, and the wealthy need an escape valve. So a two-tier system is forming. The rich get fast private care, everyone else waits. But this isn't discussed openly because it contradicts the national myth that Canada has universal health care, that everyone is treated equally. The myth remains even as the reality crumbles. The fourth silent crisis is household debt. Canadians are drowning in debt and they don't realize it because the numbers are so normalized that they seem acceptable. The average Canadian household owes $180 for every $100 of income. That's a debt-to-income ratio of 180%, the highest in the G7, higher than the United States, higher than any other major developed economy. How did this happen? Housing. Canadians borrowed massive amounts to buy homes because prices kept rising, and they believed prices would keep rising forever. So they stretched, they took on mortgages they could barely afford, and when prices rose, they borrowed more through home equity lines of credit. They used their homes as ATMs, borrowed against the rising value, and spent the money on renovations, vacations, cars, consumption. As long as home prices kept rising, it worked. They felt wealthy, but that wealth was an illusion. It wasn't real income, it was debt, and debt must be repaid. Now interest rates have risen. Mortgages that were affordable at 2% are unaffordable at 5 or 6%. Canadians who bought homes in the last 5 years are facing mortgage renewals at rates double or triple what they locked in. Many can't afford the new payments, but they can't sell, because if they sell, they might get less than they owe. They're trapped, and if the housing market falls, they're underwater, owing more than the house is worth. This is a crisis waiting to happen, and it won't take much to trigger it. A recession, rising unemployment, falling home prices, any of these could start a cascade. Defaults, foreclosures, bank losses, a credit crunch. The entire economy is leveraged on household debt, and household debt is leveraged on housing. If housing falls, everything falls, but the crisis is quiet because it hasn't happened yet. Canadians are still making payments barely. They're cutting spending in other areas, vacations, dining out, savings, but they're making the mortgage payment because losing the house is unthinkable. So they struggle quietly and hope something changes, but nothing is changing except that more debt is being added every month. The fifth silent crisis is brain drain. Canada is losing its best and brightest, and almost no one is talking about it. Every year, over 300 doctors leave Canada for the United States. They're not leaving because they hate Canada, they're leaving because the economics make sense. In Canada, doctors face high taxes, low pay relative to the US, and a healthcare system that's frustrating to work in. In the United States, they earn more, pay less in taxes, and work in a system that, for all its flaws, pays better and offers more autonomy. The same calculation applies to tech workers. Canadian software engineers earn $80,000 to $120,000 per year. In Silicon Valley, the same engineer earns $150,000 to $300,000, plus stock options, plus lower taxes in many US states. Why stay in Canada for healthcare, which is collapsing, for housing, which is unaffordable, for quality of life, which is declining as living costs rise faster than wages? So they leave, and it's not just doctors and tech workers, engineers, skilled tradespeople, entrepreneurs. Anyone with options is considering leaving because Canada has become a place where it's hard to get ahead. Taxes are high, housing is unaffordable, starting a business is difficult, regulations are burdensome, and the government is more interested in wealth redistribution than wealth creation. The result is that Canada is importing low-skilled workers through mass immigration and exporting high-skilled workers through brain drain. This is economically devastating because high-skilled workers pay the most taxes, they start the businesses, they drive innovation, and they're leaving. What remains is a population that's older, less productive, and more dependent on government services, which require taxes which fall on a shrinking base of productive workers. This is a death spiral, and it's happening quietly. No one tracks brain drain in official statistics. There's no headline that says Canada lost 10,000 high earners this year, but it's happening. And every person who leaves weakens the foundation a little more. So why is Canada's collapse quiet? Because the country is still functional, the lights stay on, the government still operates, people still go to work, there's no hyperinflation, no currency crisis, no mass unemployment. The collapse isn't visible in the way that Venezuela's or Argentina's collapse is visible. It's hidden in statistics that look good on the surface, but mass decline. GDP is growing, but only because of population growth and debt, not productivity. Employment is stable, but wages are stagnant, and housing is unaffordable. The government says everything is fine, and most people, because they're busy with their lives, believe it. Or they sense something is wrong, but can't articulate it. They feel poorer, they feel more stressed, they feel like they're working harder for less, but the media tells them the economy is strong, so they assume the problem is them, not the system. And the problems are blamed on external factors, COVID, global inflation, supply chains, anything except domestic policy failures. This allows the collapse to continue quietly, without resistance, without accountability, until it can't anymore. The cascade, when it comes, won't be quiet. It will start with housing. Prices will fall, not because of policy, but because they can't rise forever. Mortgages will default. Banks will tighten lending. Construction will collapse. And the 30% of the economy tied to real estate will contract. That will trigger a recession. Unemployment will rise. Tax revenues will fall. And the government, which is already running deficits, will face a fiscal crisis. Immigration will become unsustainable because a country in recession can absorb 500,000 new people per year. Social services will be overwhelmed, political backlash will intensify, and the brain drain will accelerate because the best and brightest will see the writing on the wall and leave while they still can. What remains will be a country that's poorer, older, more indebted, and less productive than it is today. And all of this is happening quietly right now beneath the surface, invisible to most, but inevitable. Canada isn't collapsing like a building on fire. It's collapsing like a bridge with a cracked foundation. It still stands, it still functions, but the cracks are growing, and one day the weight will be too much. History doesn't repeat, but if you don't understand it, it will crush you all the same. Canada's collapse is quiet, but it's real, and it's coming. If this gave you a new perspective, hit subscribe. The Fiscoria, history has the answers.